Okay, looks like we are live. So the Special Purpose Asset Company, or SPAC. I'm going to lay out the argument that we have SPAC madness now, or Special Purpose Asset Company madness. And this is because of the totally bonkers amount of excess currency and credit outstanding, thanks to the Cantillon Effect. So the rich and powerful economic and political elites have access to this this artificially cheap currency and credit, and then they are going and setting up these special purpose asset companies to go and buy distressed assets, distressed small and medium-sized businesses from Main Street that the small business owners did not have access to, although some of them look like they're going to get some loan forgiveness maybe in the next congressional bailout bill, but it is nowhere near the amount that the hedge fund managers, the political insiders like Paul Ryan, hedge fund managers like Bill Ackman, who raised $4 billion back in July to set up a new special purpose asset company, or SPAC. This is a perfect example of what George Gammon and myself and other Austrian school economists have been talking about with the Cantillon Effect, how the economic and political elites are getting unbelievable access to almost unlimited amounts of cheap currency and credit to go buy assets, especially distressed assets, distressed small and medium-sized businesses on Main Street that could not get funds, that could not go to their large bank branch and go and get a loan at the time, unfortunately. So the amount of SPACs is insane. As you can see there, I set up a storyboard to try to give you a glimpse of things, of all the craziness there, of all the different major current events that have happened with the special purpose asset companies. Now, in the past financial crises, there's been a lot of other special purpose asset companies, but there is slated to be an insane amount of initial public offerings, IPOs, for these SPACs coming up. Now, these are where economic and political elites have been buying up distressed assets since February, March, April, and there was most people are not aware of this, in the CARES Act from Congress, from U.S. Treasury and Congress. It was one of the few things that the White House and Republicans and Democrats actually agreed on. There was a special $500 billion slush fund set up. I think Democrats wanted a little bit more transparency in there, but they both wanted to give large corporations and hedge fund managers and other political insiders access to this easier currency and credit to go buy those distressed assets from Main Street, the small and medium-sized businesses. So there is a new IPO for a SPAC. It's Defiance ETFs launches the first special purpose acquisition company, or SPAC ETF, and this is why it's SPAC madness. SPAC madness, because of all the craziness that's happening with the currency and credit, and these elites, these hedge fund managers, these political elites, these rich people with access to this cheaper currency and credit, thanks to the central banks manipulating interest rates and all these currency creation and bailout plans and stimulus. They're labeled stimulus, but they're really just bailouts or free currency and credit for economic and political insiders, like what the Cantillon Effect is about, to go and buy distressed assets for cheap. And so finally, some of these SPACs, where they've been buying assets that are artificially cheap since February, because a lot of these politicians at the state and local level here in the United States have been keeping businesses closed, making sure that business owners can't stay afloat. And now there's going to be initial public offerings. There's going to be a lot of them, where the rich people who have been buying up assets for many months now with this cheap currency and credit, putting together these not real companies, they're just conglomerations, these SPACs, and then they're going to be cashing out in an initial public offering to retail investors and pension funds. Those are the normal bag holders. This is how the game is played. And it is a game, and it is a rigged game, unfortunately. And the central banks and the government bureaucrats and the regulators and all the lobbyists and the other people making 7-8 figures a year in the DC metro area off the corruption are all benefiting. So the SPACs gave emerging companies both flexibility and control, while investors finally have open access to some of the biggest investment deals in the market. I think Airbnb might be involved in a SPAC. There's a number of headlines. I have articles about this, about where is Bill Ackman going to be deploying those $4 billion that he was so easily able to raise back in July. And then there's a new IPO coming out October 9th. This article, Apollo-backed SPAC, Special Purpose Asset Company, SPAC, aims to raise $400 million in another IPO. A blank check company backed by private equity firm Apollo Global Management said on Friday it was looking to raise $400 million on a U.S. initial public offering. There are 300, I think, total, maybe over 300. Let me check that tweet there. It says, push the total number of 300 outstanding SPACs from the SPAC king. That was a month or two ago. So I think it's actually a little over 300 total SPACs now, raising well over $100 million, up to a couple $1 billion. So there's a bunch of these special purpose acquisition companies floating around out there, and a large percentage of them are slated, according to the SPAC king there, the tweet, to go initial public offering. I think it says maybe almost 70% in the not too distant future IPO. He said 8 different ones filed for initial public offering. There's a backlog of 123 blank check companies that have filed for an IPO but have not yet IPO'd. So that's a large chunk of the 300 total. It's not quite 50% then. And then there was even, I have in the bottom there was even a special purpose acquisition company to try to buy other special purpose acquisition companies. A SPAC on top of a SPAC. Or SPAC squared. What a waste of capital. But if it's that cheap and that easy to get, and your friend's brother's cousin, who's a lobbyist, can get you access to that congressional slush fund, or can get you a low interest rate loan, or maybe a no interest rate loan, assets suddenly become easy to buy. Distressed assets suddenly become easy to buy. And then better yet, you can set up an IPO, initial public offering, and then dump them, sell high, onto pension funds and retail investors. This is how the rig game is played. Blank check company backed by private equity firm Apollo Global Management said on Friday it was looking to raise $400 million in a U.S. initial public offering, aka cashing out. Spartan Acquisition Corp is aiming to sell 40 million units at $10 a piece, the company said in a filing. It is a special acquisition purpose company that is looking to invest in a business focused on energy transition and sustainability. A SPAC is a shell vehicle that raises money in an IPO to buy and then merge with another company, typically within 2 years. So these are all short-term parasite companies. They're not even really companies. I mean, it's more of oh my god, it's such a weird mix of things. But the main key here is this is corruption. This is the Cantillon Effect. These are entities, economic and political elites, getting access to very cheap currency and credit, and then they're able to go and buy these assets for pennies on the dollar back in February, March, April, May, when things were absolutely total panic and chaos. And in some areas, I mean, businesses are still going out. Politicians at certain state and local level are not opening businesses up yet. So those assets are going to be distressed too. But in general, there was a lot of distressed assets to buy from February through May and June. You cannot make this stuff up. It is that bad. So you have Defiance, the Defiance Next Generation SPAC Derived ETF. This is pretty easy to remember, except it's not spelled the exact way as SPAC, but it's close. It's SPAK. I'd have to look at the underlying garbage in the index. Well, actually, I'm not sure what's in the index, but it probably is garbage. Most of these guys are just cashing out because they bought the assets literally for pennies on the dollar with artificially cheap currency and credit, and now it's time to make your enormous profits in a very short amount of time, less than 6 months, and cash out. And this is how messed up the entire system is. But apparently that's not inflationary. All this extra currency and credit that was created and handed out to economic and political elites so they could all get cheap assets, buy cheap at corporate raiders, or just basically theft, wealth transfer, and just buy cheap distressed assets of small and medium-sized Main Street businesses that mom and pop, small, medium-sized business owners could not get capital because the banks probably wouldn't lend to them. Oh, you had a good business, but your governor or your bureaucrats or your mayor shut down your business, so we're not going to give you a loan. Oh, but Mr. SPAC over here or Mrs. SPAC over there, oh, we'll give them a loan and they can buy up your assets for pennies on the dollar because it's SPAC madness. Just ridiculous. unbelievably dystopian. But this is another perfect example of the Cantillon Effect. George Gammon, excellent video in the last couple days about a wealth transfer. The economic and political elites, as part of stagflate and tax and lie, transferring wealth, more wealth, to themselves. And this is the SPACs, the artificially cheap currency and credit. This is part, with the special purpose acquisition companies or SPACs, this is one of the ways that they've been doing it. And apparently, before the next stock market crash, there's going to be a lot of these SPAC IPOs just dumped back onto retail investors and pension funds. What a mess. I could lie and say I'm not surprised, but I've been doing this for so long that honestly nothing surprises me anymore. But good luck finding all of this information in one place. Most people will not bother to understand that all of this is part of the Cantillon Effect, with this currency and credit being given out like candy to these spoiled rich economic and political elites in the Washington, D.C. metro area and New York City. Just amazing how easily Bill Ackman was able to raise $4 billion. And he did a lot of fraud on that, the biotech company. God, I can't remember the name offhand. Valiant. Oh yeah, he really shit the bed on that one. On Valiant Pharmaceutical. He screwed that one up. Yeah, there we go. He screwed up Valiant so bad. And yes, he has a good long-term track record, but he screwed up Valiant so bad, lost billions of dollars for his investors, and it was a fraud. And he didn't research the fraud. And yet he's able to raise $4 billion easily to go and set up this special purpose asset company. And you have hedge fund manager here from Australia, Bronte Capital, John Hempton, saying this SPAC boom, special purpose asset company boom, has proved that many big name hedge fund managers, probably this is directed at Bill Ackman. I don't really know any other big name hedge fund managers that bothered to SPAC, that participated yet in SPAC madness, are really money grabbing whores. Oh man. Something tells me he's not going to get invited to the next conference that Bill Ackman is throwing, the next hedge fund manager conference. These hedge fund manager guys all have really big egos, so it's actually pretty funny. Thomas says that SPACs are companies with no commercial operations that are established solely to raise capital from investors for the purpose of acquiring one or more operating businesses. Yes, but because capital, currency, and credit is so cheap, and assets were distressed because the economy was shut down by politicians and bureaucrats for so long, that SPACs became corporate raiders. They became easily able to buy distressed assets for pennies on the dollar. And then also, on top of this, the U.S. Treasury, with President Trump, Steve Mnuchin, who's corrupt as shit, and will probably start taking money from the Chinese government again in the not-too-distant future if he's not already on their payroll. And then Congress all want to help out with that slush fund, that $500 billion slush fund that was stuck into the CARES Act back in, what was it, March or April. This is how crazy and dystopian everything is. Okay, well, this is enough for the rant. If you want to read more about this corruption scheme with currency and credit, with the Cantillon Effect, I will attach about 5 or 6 different articles in the information and description section. But I think the important thing to understand here is the economic and political elites for these SPACs. There's at least 300 of them. They're going to be dumping a lot of these probably in the next 6 to 8 months onto retail investors with the initial public offering. That is cashing out. So you will see the CNBSs, you will see Jim Cramer. Jim Cramer will do the interviews, Mr. highly paid clown in the clown suit who blocked me on Twitter and can't take any criticism, and he has to pump and dump a lot of other stuff. You will see them have on the guy who bought all these assets for pennies on the dollar in the SPAC because his brother's cousin was a lobbyist and he got access to that cheap currency and credit. Well, Paul Ryan's even there. Maybe they knew Paul Ryan. Former Speaker of the House there. Paul Ryan's not a finance guy. Paul Ryan was even able to raise, what was it, $300 million Blank check company backed by former U.S. House Speaker Paul Ryan. Mr. Neocon, Paul Ryan, said on Monday, Mittens Romney's vice presidential candidate, Mittens Romney, another corporate raider, another private equity guy, Mittens Romney, said on Monday, another neocon, said on Monday it plans to raise $300 million. This was from August 24th. In an initial public offering, joining the recent frenzy of Wall Street deal-making with SPACs. Special purpose asset companies. SPAC madness. Lots of examples of this. you have a bad app and you wonder if you can get 4 billion. I'm not going to read what type of app you have. 4 billion from Masa Sons. It's Masa Sons. Okay. SoftBank. No, SoftBank only likes revenue growth generation. You have to be able to grow revenues. You have to have a technology story. Or SoftBank has to be able to front run your trades with options. Is anyone going to go to prison for the options trades that SoftBank put on? I mean, it's just ridiculous at this point what the rich people get away with all the fraud. I mean, are the regulators, are they going to at least get fined? Like, I know the regulators don't want to put any of the rich people in prison. Are they at least going to fine them? Last question here. Why did FDX go parabolic since March? That's Freeport-McMoRan copper and gold. It went parabolic since the copper price went parabolic, since China stockpiled a bunch of copper. You should research commodity prices before you ask me those questions. And if you're a Patreon account contributor, you would know. Okay, well, that's it for this little rant on SPACs. And this is all related to the Cantillon Effect. Lots of currency and credit, artificially cheap. Thank you, central banks, and also governments doing fiscal stimulus policy that is sloshing around. And so all these people who had access to this currency and credit saw, hey, all these small and medium-sized businesses on Main Street, they're going bankrupt, or they can't get access, they can't get any loans, or their politicians at the governor level, state level, at the county or city level shut down their businesses, but eventually they're going to restart. So we're going to buy these things since we got cheap currency and credit. We're going to buy these assets for pennies, and then the businesses are going to reopen at some point, but we're rich, we can wait, and then we're going to sell them for enormous profits because we bought them for pennies on the dollar with currency and credit that was artificially cheap, that was just created out of thin air. But the average person on Main Street gets the freaking shaft, because maybe their business was the one that was screwed over. And then if they're not going to have the opportunity to buy any of these things until they go initial public offering, which means that the insiders who created these Frankenstein companies, they're not really companies, these Frankenstein mashups, in a short amount of time, they're cashing out. And it's going to be dumped onto retail investors. And maybe in the short period of time, maybe these SPACs, when they do go IPO, they will go up for a short period of time. But normally, with a lot of these IPOs, the underlying business is not in good shape anymore. Tends to be more like Tilray, where if you read the prospectus, the IPO prospectus from Tilray, you realize that thing was a ticking time bomb. I did a live stream show on that a couple years ago when the Tilray Marijuana Corp went IPO, that it was a ticking time bomb, all the disclosures in there, and that they were probably never going to make a profit. It was actually disclosed by the lawyers in there that the company would probably never, ever make a profit. And that was only a matter of time. Well, thank you very much for listening to this rant. If you want to read other content, research, information, analysis, and financial education, it is available behind the paywall on my Patreon. You can join one of over 1,000 people paying $5 a month. That is a very cheap sum for a lot of good content, research, analysis. You're also helping fund some of these YouTube videos, which I try to provide content on here that other people just don't think about. I spend a lot of time piecing together articles on related topics. That storyboard you see there on my screen took quite a bit of time to piece together all the different articles and tweets into one place. And unfortunately now, Google and YouTube are censoring so much that no matter how many YouTube videos I make each month I make almost nothing in ads off the in ad revenues off the video. So I guess they're just taking, if they do run ads on the videos, because now they set it, the default setting is on demonetized, and I have to manually reset it before I hit the live stream button. If they do allow ad revenues, they are taking probably almost all the ad revenues. I think I made a couple $100 for all of September doing a lot of different videos for Google AdWords revenues. So without my Patreon, would not be able to pay my bills. So thank you very much to my Patreon account contributors. You're keeping all of this content available for the people out there who are not Patreon account contributors.